Welcome back to Through the Mirror Dimly. My name is Daniel Schaefer, and we'll be continuing our quick reflections on the book of Romans. Today, now that we've gotten the kind of big view of this argument from Paul, today we're going to talk about the next couple verses and start going verse by verse through the larger argument here that God shows no partiality, but that all are judged on the same thing, and that is faith in God. So, going back up to verse 16, it is, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, the Jew first and also the Greek." So again, it is no partiality, it is the Jew first and then the Greek. It is inclusive. Paul is arguing that it should be viewed that no matter whether you're a Jew or a Greek, you are on a level playing field. We might read that and see Jew first and think that that is partiality, but that is not the argument being made. The Jews would have thought that they are God's people, and so they will be the rulers in the new kingdom, or that they are at a higher station because they have the circumcision. They are God's people. But Paul is making the point that while the Messiah came to them and they had the law and the prophets, they are not a cut above. They are not made better ontologically than the Greeks or the Gentiles. "For in it the righteousness of God is revealed from faith to faith, as is written, but the righteous man shall live by faith. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. Because that which is known about God is evident within them, for God made it evident to them. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that they are without excuse. For even though they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks, but they became futile in their speculations, and their foolish heart was darkened." So, this is where Paul is setting up a juxtaposition between the righteous, those who have faith in God will live, and that the righteousness of God is revealed from faith to faith, and the righteous man shall live by faith, or by faith the righteous shall live. And then the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. And so this is where when God is revealed, when Jesus came, when he came on the earth, he came, and those who believed in him, and those who saw the truth and believed, are righteous, and those are the ones who will live. But those who did not believe and those who rejected Christ, God's wrath is revealed against them because they suppressed the truth. So if we go to John 3:16, and this is where I often sometimes think that we should memorize much more than just John 3:16, because this whole section lays out the truth of what we need to hear, and much better than just verse 16. So if we go from verse 14, "As Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up, so that whoever believes will in him have eternal life. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. For God did not send the Son into the world to judge the world, but that the world might be saved through him. He who believes in him is not judged, but he who does not believe has been judged already, because he has not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of God. And this is the judgment, that the light has come into the world, and men love the darkness rather than the light, for their deeds were evil. For everyone who does evil hates the light, and does not come to the light for fear that his deeds will be exposed. But he who practices the truth comes to the light, so that his deeds may be manifested as having been wrought in God." And so these are the two people that Paul is referencing here. Those who see the light and come into the light because they are following God. And those who see the light and they hide from it because their deeds are evil and they don't want their deeds exposed and they don't want to come into the light. And so with that, the wrath of God is revealed against those who suppress the truth. And that also points to the fact that this is not a condition from birth, because they are suppressing something that they knew. So at one point they have the truth and they suppress it, or they know at least some form of the truth and they suppress it. And in verse 21, that's even more clear. For even though they knew God, and they did not honor him as God or give thanks, but they became futile in their speculations, and their foolish heart was darkened. So they became futile, and their heart was darkened. These are not conditions from birth. This is an overtime thing. Just as if you're married and you cheat on your wife, the first time you'll probably feel something, but over time you become calloused and you become hard, and it becomes less. You don't have that same feeling of guilt and shame, and you just slowly become calloused and hard in it. It's kind of the same thing with God, where the more you sin, the more you suppress the truth, the harder your heart can become and the more calloused, and your heart becomes dark. And then you don't want the light because your deeds are evil and you don't want your sin to be exposed. And so one way to take this is that this is talking about humanity from the beginning, from Noah, that they have, since the creation of the world, God's invisible attributes, his divine power, his nature have been clearly seen. And over the span, humanity has slowly turned from God and created idols, created their pantheistic religions, created various forms of religion where they create idols and they bow down and worship blocks of wood or golden calves, or just completely deny the existence of God. But the other way to take this is that this is talking about the Jews themselves, who they knew God. Again, for even though they knew God, they did not honor him or give thanks, but became futile. And this is the pattern of Israel throughout their history, is where they knew God, they knew he brought them from Egypt, but they exchanged that truth for a lie. They created idols. They became syncretistic and brought in pagan practices, and they became very futile in their thinking, and their hearts were darkened. That's what God talks about all the time. Their hearts are far from me. Your lips are near me, but your hearts are far from me. And we read yesterday, as we read through this whole thing, and we'll get there again, but how God's name was blasphemed throughout the nations because of them, because they exchanged the truth of God for a lie. But it also asks the question, in what way, since creation, are his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature clearly seen? Like, what does that mean? Because one of the big, apologetic questions is the hiddenness of God, or why isn't God more evident to us? And that's where, this is just myself speaking, but one of the things that's really easy for me to ground myself in is, why is there something rather than nothing? It's something that I took for granted until I learned, otherwise, but that I've always known that the universe was created, that, there's the redshift, which shows that stuff is cooling and moving farther away from each other, and which shows, since it's moving away, that there is a beginning to the universe, and that we know that at some point there will be the heat death of the universe and everything will get so far away that it will just cool and there will be no energy left. But I didn't realize, as a kid, or probably longer than I should have, that wasn't known for all that long. In my mind, it's like, oh, the universe exists. It had to have had a beginning. But then, I learned that Einstein, when he came up with the theory of relativity, that he basically created a constant so that the universe always existed, because he didn't want to admit that it was created. And that is such a thing when we talk about science and everything, how there is underlying presuppositions, but that's a different conversation. And so now that we know the universe is created, we have to realize that there is a creator and that something made it. The universe is not eternal. The universe is not infinite, once you get into if something's infinite, how does, you never arrive at infinite, because it's always infinite, and it gets into this recursive logic, and our brains aren't made for infinity. But all that to say that when you think about his eternal power and divine nature, you have to realize that if something is created, something uncreated made it. There's a argument called the Kalam cosmological argument, which is basically a philosophical way of phrasing, hey, the universe exists, so God made it. It goes, everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe has a cause. And so from the very basic level, you have to go, God and his power and divine nature is evident to all, which is why I think that the Proverbs say, the fool says in his heart, there is no God. That there's the pagan culture, there's believing in false gods and following false gods, which is evil and is denying who God is. But then there's the fool who says there is no God. There's no God, period. And to believe that is a foolish thing, because how does something come from nothing? There is no reason for something unless there is an uncreated creator. There has to be a first cause, and that is God, and that power is evident. Even if people think that the universe created itself somehow, then you are making the universe God in some sense. But God has his divine power and his nature are revealed just by the fact that the universe exists, and that it is already incomprehensibly huge and vast and complex. And so we can at least know that. We at least know that that is there, and that it is something outside of this. And so this is saying that since the creation, that's been clear. But then they gave it up to worship the created things. They gave it up to worship animals or carved objects or even angels. Like, they gave it up to worship all these created things instead of the creator who created everything and is actually deserving of our worship. And so that is something that we need to remind ourselves of, is that we can't worship the things that were created. Some things are so astronomical that it seems so powerful, so amazing, which is why they were worshipped. Like the Egyptians worshipped the sun god Ra. And that's why, every single plague in Exodus was against an Egyptian god, because God is showing, no, I created everything. You are just making things up, or you are following demons who are behind all of these things. But they are not deserving of your worship. Only the creator is deserving of our worship. And so if we ever find ourselves thinking that anything in this world will save us, we need to remember that there is only one creator who is worth that, and that it is the rejection of that, and that it is turning to created things that can darken our hearts and darken our understanding, and that God's wrath is revealed against those who suppress the truth of who he is. So that's about all we have time for today. Next time we'll continue on. Thank you for joining me. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.